Hello and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network, and joining us in studio today, she's a regular.
Yes, and I'm back again because it's mosquito season all over again.
She's the bug lady.
I am.
The bug lady. Thanks for coming, though. I appreciate it. Obviously, every year you come in, it's great advice, and the information you give is so important, especially this time of year as we late summer, early fall, really until the first frost, which could be for a few more months, for crying out loud when
Absolutely.
you think about it.
Yep, Halloween.
Yeah. So I mean, it's out there right now. Curious. I mean, as we tape the show here, obviously it is late summer and we're getting ready. Kids are back at school. How has the summer gone right now, leading up to this time?
So it was dry, right? Everybody knows nobody has a lawn. Everything is dry. When we have hot, dry summers, though, we tend to get a lot of West Nile virus activity. It's much better for that type of mosquito because it's more of a container mosquito that's really close and lives right around us. So those buckets you have in your backyard, the kiddie pool that maybe been for the kids or for the dogs, especially over those hot days, you're saving water to water your tomato plants and all these things you have in your backyard, people washing their cars, those catch basins on the street. Those things hold water, but the regular wetlands that we have are not. So West Nile virus has definitely been something that we've been keeping an eye on, and there has been activity in the county, both in Bristol and Plymouth County. And with the dryness, though, what ends up happening is we end up getting these longer seasons. So most human cases for West Nile virus actually occur now in September and October. So it's really important for people to not think Labor Day, summer's over, you know.
Take off the white. You can't wear white anymore. But.
Exactly. Put the spray away in the sunscreen. You know, keep your repellents out for those activities you're going to do with those kids now that the nights are a little bit more comfortable to be out in.
And just a note, too, as you and I were saying off camera, Fall River has a reported case of West Nile, and I know Wareham has it, so it's kind of in between New Bedford as well. So, but it's not that far away.
Absolutely not. So we have mosquitoes collected through all of our 20 cities and towns within Bristol County, as they do in Plymouth County. And yes, we were just able to pick it up last week in Fall River, but we've also found it in Easton and Attleboro, and so we know that it certainly is around. We also found it in Berkeley this past week as well. So, you know, it's all over. We should always remember that there's unfortunately a chance that somebody could get bit by a mosquito.
It's always good, I think, to start. I know you've done this every year, but to talk about A, what is West Nile virus, B, what is triple E.
Sure.
And I think there's a difference between the two and how they come about, but I don't think people understand. They just know it's a mosquito-borne disease.
Right. And as long as I'm getting you to protect yourself from mosquitoes, I'll take it. But certainly West Nile virus tends to be late season, and it tends to be more of your backyard breeders, those that you're sitting with while you're out having your coffee on your back deck in the morning or, you know, in the evenings. So what we're worried about is tends to be less impactful health-wise. Many people that get West Nile virus don't even know that they get it, and then of those few that do can get seriously ill, but a very small percentage, thank goodness, actually die from West Nile virus. But it's been talked to about like a summer flu. The symptoms are very similar to triple E, but less severe, so your headaches, your muscle aches, you know, if you get a fever, any of those things, you know, we definitely talk to your doctors about. Triple E, Eastern equine encephalitis, uses a different group of mosquitoes that more habitat our natural wetlands that we have around here. So for New Bedford, we have the Acushnet Cedar Swamp, we have the New Bedford Freetown Swamp. Those are the areas where it starts within the bird populations, and then it starts to move out into the general mosquitoes that we can find closer to those that inhabit us. But triple E, unfortunately, is very severe. Almost all people who get severe cases of triple E do pass away or have lifelong what am I?
Complications.
Complications. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, so it's much different, and in those years we tend to pick it up much more frequently earlier in the season, but have a prolonged effect out into September and October.
So what are the differences between the two?
So it almost always presents very similar.
Right.
So there's almost, it's in the severity. Unfortunately with Tripoli, with the brain swelling and the encephalitis, you can get seizures, really severe headaches, and those are the things that are going to tell you really need to seek, a doctor's advice. What we find though is that with the mosquitoes and how the mosquitoes work for Tripoli is a little bit different than it is for West Nile virus. So we hopefully will get sort of a preemptive information from our mosquitoes that we're sampling. So of the 51 different mosquitoes that we have in Bristol County, only a small portion actually are important for either the transmission of West Nile or Tripoli.
And just on the aside, I don't think people understand what you just said. There's 51 different types of mosquitoes.
Exactly, and not all of them are important for disease. Some of them don't even feed on people. They only feed on birds. They can only feed on reptiles. So there's quite a difference. So what we do at Bristol County is we collect the mosquitoes, as well as the Department of Public Health does it as well throughout our county. And they will look at the mosquitoes, will identify the ones that are important for transmission, submit them back to the Department of Public Health for testing for West Nile and Tripoli. And sometimes we can get what we hope to be sort of that early warning sign, right? So now that we're finding West Nile virus in the environment, like you said, in Berkeley, in Fall River, as well in many places in Plymouth County, that's hey, it's out there. Let's start taking more precautions and make sure we're using our bug spray and avoiding getting bit by mosquitoes.
Why is, in a sense, mosquito control important? Because of that? I mean, again, I don't think people even know that, as you were telling me on the phone last week, you've been already spraying for a while now. You're almost done, if not done.
Correct, right. So mosquito control was formed back in the 50s when Eastern equine encephalitis was actually found here in Massachusetts. There were outbreaks prior to that, but it was formed really because of that. But it was also formed because of nuisance mosquitoes, right? So if you live down here, anywhere near the salt marsh, we all have been unfortunately bothered by our salt marsh mosquitoes. So back in the 60s, they did a lot of work to help keep the water off the marshes, which would prevent the mosquitoes from being able to live there and become adults. So we do a lot of water management in our job as well, even now, besides just making pesticide applications, keeping that water moving so we don't get it. But yeah, it was all formed, partially for disease risk and partially so you could enjoy your outside and actually be able to go outside and enjoy the evenings without getting bitten up by mosquitoes. Because remember, West Nile virus just came into Massachusetts, in 2000. So it hasn't really been here as long, but Tripoli's been here since the 30s at least.
And the program has grown too. What you did in the 50s isn't what you're doing now.
That's so true, and thanks for bringing that up, because that's pesticides are different, amounts of pesticides that we're putting out, when the pesticides are being applied, is all different. We're using different chemistries now. We try to use more biologicals for our larvicides as opposed to what would be considered more a synthetic pesticide. We do water management year round. We were able to grow our department some so that way we could work on that as well, and that gives us a chance to keep those ditches clean, keep that water moving so that it doesn't stagnate and make breeding habitat.
And I know, because you've talked about it in the past, but I think it's worth renoting again too, is that people do get worried when they hear about pesticides and whatever, but you've always talked about the safety of what you guys are doing on a nightly basis and throughout the county.
Sure, we want to definitely promote that, we are trying to reduce risk from disease-carrying mosquitoes, but we also want to make sure we're reducing any risk to the people, that may be exposed to pesticides. So we make our pesticide applications by truck in the early morning hours between 2 a.m. and sunrise. That's not only because most of us are sleeping, maybe some of us are jogging, but most of us are sleeping, but it's also when mosquitoes are most active. So the pesticides that we use have to come in contact with the mosquito in order to kill it. So making an application in the middle of the day when they're not really out because it's too hot doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we have tried to make sure that we keep making our applications when there's least risk to also non-targets, right? So bees, butterflies, dragonflies, all of those things. You know, we don't want to be out there when they're also out there.
And you know, you've talked in the past too about, you know, the concern that people always worry about the water supply and things like that for, you know, what does the pesticide do to harm our health? But as you've said in the past, we're okay.
Right. So we put out less than an ounce per acre, right? So we like to say it's less than a shot glass worth of liquid over the course of a football field. So small amounts. We avoid any drinking water areas that we need to. They do that as well in the event of a big Tripoli outbreak where, you know, the planes have to get up and stuff like that. So we're really trying to, you know, minimize risk and make sure we're making the applications also where it makes the most sense, right? So where are the mosquitoes and where are they not? Because that's the best place to make the applications.
So when you talk about the swamps, or the north end of New Bedford in particular, I mean, the swamps are always there. Mm-hmm. So how do you limit, or you can't really prevent it because it's just the nature of where the mosquitoes are, but how do you limit the growth of the mosquitoes and the larvae?
So one of the things we have been working on is some studies to try to see if we can make better applications to those areas. If you've been out in these areas, they're cryptic, right? So they have these big trees, you know, red maples, white cedar trees, and they make these little crypts where their roots come out of the water and there's these caverns underneath it, and they can be quite deep. Those are where the mosquitoes live. So when we're making an application from the air, it's very difficult to get the product down into there. So we're working on new ways to do that, right? Changing up the formulation of the product. Is a liquid better? How big is the droplet for the liquid? You know, is the granular better? Heavier, lighter? You know, how do these things move through the habitat and get down there? So we're working on some things like that, but it's extremely difficult.
Because it's not like you can just walk in there and do ground spraying.
No. I mean, most of our habitats are, you know, hundreds of acres.
Right.
You know, and most of the larvicides that we want to put out are going out at a minimum of 5 to 10 pounds per acre. So no, unfortunately, we can't do it by hand. Right. So we are trying to find ways, you know, to see if we can do it differently. We're also seeing that there is water level differences. So last winter, we actually had a lot, we don't remember it now, but there was actually a lot of rain.
We had a blizzard.
Yeah, there was a lot of water out there.
Yeah,
last winter going into the start of the season. But once April and May came and those trees started leafing out and really growing and starting their new season, they really took in that water and they really dried down a lot. And we got very little larvae over the course of what we would consider the start of the season for Tripoli, which would be June, right? So we were looking for a specific mosquito that comes from that habitat, and there just was not enough water there to support a good population.
And you've always said too, and it's worth noting, is really the winter, you know, after the first frost, what you are looking at and your colleagues is the precipitation from that first frost onward to see what the water availability is, if I'm not mistaken. So the winter determines what's going to happen in the summer.
Sure. So we do start looking right around October because that's when the mosquitoes are going to overwinter in that water. So provided that there's decent water there in October, and then, what happens all winter, because if the water freezes solid, which is unlikely, but when there's a lot of water, you know, you just get a slight layer of ice, but the mosquitoes are perfectly fine to overwinter underneath that ice in the muck and be, you know, great come the next spring. But yes, if things start drying down, all of their habitat goes away, and it can really help us predict what's going to happen next year. So in the winter, we will go out, we'll break through the ice and search for some mosquito larvae, see if we can get an idea of where we feel like we might be come, you know, June of the following year.
And so when you went out this year, because I know obviously we've talked about the dryness that we've had, the drought. I can't imagine what the swamps look like this year. I mean, Are they down too?
They are,
Yeah.
certainly, yes. We were going to conduct another experiment this past April into May. The pesticide we were going to use has about a 4-week period of which it's effective when it's in contact with the mosquito larvae. There was no water. It wasn't worth trying to make the application. We weren't going to be able to get the mosquitoes and the water and the pesticide all in the same place. So it changed really quickly. Like within 1 week, where it was up to your ankles, you went out the next week and you were just stepping on wet dirt. It was much, much different. And that's how it was pretty much all summer.
Yeah.
What we're concerned about though is these past couple of weeks, right? So we just got these these summer, fall rains.
Right.
So it's giving them a little bit of habitat, to make it through the winter. So now we have to start to be more careful. We do always see a slight spike in the mosquito that's important for Tripoli right in the beginning of September.
Really? Okay.
And that's going to be some of the mosquitoes that are overwintering, laying their eggs to overwinter for next year. So we do have to keep an eye on that.
And I should mention too that you folks do use the ground spraying.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying obviously you can't go in the swamps, but I know, for example, you do the ground sprayings around the parks here in New Bedford. So ground spraying is effective in some ways.
Absolutely.
Or some places, I should say.
Absolutely, right. As long as it can come in contact with the mosquitoes, then we can kill those adult mosquitoes and help reduce risk. We're not only just reducing the mosquitoes, that are biting you or could potentially bite you right at that time, we're also reducing the overall population, right? So every less female mosquito that we have means about, 150 less female mosquitoes she will then produce through her eggs, right? So we're helping to reduce the population. That helps reduce further transmission between the birds and the mosquitoes, which can then go out to us and potentially, unfortunately, make us sick.
You touched upon it, but I want to go into a little bit more detail. When you were talking about the triple E mosquitoes, people are on their porch in the morning, or this time of year, and we've talked about it off camera, is when you talk about when the mosquitoes are most active. I mean, there's after school activities, and the sunlight's getting shorter. There's times that you really need to be careful as a parent and as kids when you should take precautions.
Absolutely, and I think that when you go out in the morning for the school bus, right? When some kids have to go out really early, but right around dawn, it can get the mosquitoes can come out. It's cool, it's comfortable, it's usually humid, not summer humid, but humid enough to make those mosquitoes very happy. And then in the evening, so you're going to a football game, you're sitting in the bleachers, your kids are playing in the playground while your other kids are cheering or doing band or playing football. All of those people are now at risk in those times when we're just sort of sitting around and enjoying, what we would consider to be fall activities. So definitely want to watch out for that. And then as we progress, because unfortunately we're starting to get, frost come Halloween, right? So we're still talking about hay rides and, campouts and all of those things that can happen.
I think you've said it before. It's sort of like right before sunrise and right after sunset is when you've got to take the precautions. And I remember, and you and I were reminiscing, it doesn't seem that long ago, but the schools around in New Bedford and around surrounding towns, they had to move games up because they were worried about Triple E.
Absolutely. Yep. 2019, still the worst season on record for Triple E in the state. And we were trying to do everything to help minimize risk. And certainly, trying to be more careful when you're out. And we do that hopefully through the surveillance that we're doing through testing mosquitoes for Triple E and West Nile virus and providing hopefully a warning system to people to be more careful and know. So we haven't found it in New Bedford specifically, but that doesn't mean it's not out there, right? Because now we're seeing it, popping up all over, both of the counties. So we know that it's there. It's just harder to catch when there's less mosquitoes.
So we've spent time talking about it, but let's talk about the precautions. I think a lot of people know them, but it's worth going over them again, as we always do. And again, parents need to take heed when it becomes the morning and the afternoon, or the late afternoon and early evenings. How do we protect ourselves?
So I like to use the 5 Ds of protection, right? So avoid activity at dusk and dawn. we can't do that, right? Because we all have to get
Right.
up and go out. Dress appropriately. Getting a little bit better now that it's not 100 degrees. Long sleeves, long shirts, slightly loose so that way, they can't bite right through your clothing. And then DEET or another EPA approved repellent. So any repellent that you find that works well for you, read the label. Apply as necessary. You don't need 100% DEET, 20% DEET, 15% DEET is fine. It'll only give you about 3 hours worth of coverage. So think about your activity, right? If you're only gonna go sit out at a game for a couple of hours, perfectly fine. You're going camping for the weekend, make sure you reapply.
Right.
And then certainly this year, because of these rainstorms we just got, dump, right? You gotta dump any standing water around your property. Everything filled up, everything, tarps, kiddie pools, wheelbarrows. You'll be surprised.
Look around
walking
your house.
around, and dump. Because if you're breeding them right there, you're gonna feed them the next time you go outside. Most of our mosquitoes, for West Nile virus, they don't fly far. They're going a couple of houses down from you at most. They're not going.
They don't want to take a long stroll.
Exactly, right? Like if I have a buffet right here of 3 people sitting outside, I'm not going to be flying very far to go find a meal. So you definitely want to remove any of those things around your property, and that will help. I mean, it's not going to prevent all mosquitoes because there are always going to be catch basins in the streets and other wetlands around your property.
You've talked about, I know people get worried about what are they applying to their bodies. And I know you can't get into specifics about brands or whatever, but what should people be looking for when because they are worried about, again, putting chemicals on themselves.
Sure. So that's why, certainly always make sure that long sleeves and long pants are always an option. DEET is, kind of the gold standard. DEET's been around for years, 50 plus years. There's a lot of data that says that DEET is safe to use. You want to make sure you apply it correctly. Don't spray it in your face and everything like that. Reapply as necessary. Picaridin is a new active ingredient. So this is when you look at those spray cans, and you're looking for the list of what they have. DEET, picaridin. Oil of lemon eucalyptus is more of a natural kind of.
I was going to ask you about, because some people say, I want a natural thing.
Right. Oil of lemon eucalyptus is great. It's got a very strong smell. Might not be for everybody. It's an oil, so it's kind of slimy. So some people don't like that. And it does have an age restriction. You can't use it on younger kids. So you do have to make sure you read that.
I was going to ask you, when parents are talking about babies or toddlers, is there differences, or what precautions do you want to give them?
Sure, there is on the label, 2 and under, you want to make sure that you're using something that's appropriate. You want to make sure you're applying it to your hands and rubbing it on your children. You can also make sure that if say you have somebody in a stroller, use a net, a mosquito net, right? And that can help keep them out so you don't have to put the pesticides directly on it. There is clothes that is available that has permethrin, which is good for ticks as well. It is already embedded into the clothes. You can wash the clothes. It stays on the clothes. That's a good thing to use too if you don't want to put anything on your skin. And it wouldn't be an everyday thing, right? You're going for a hike, let's wear these clothes. You can also buy it in a spray. You don't apply it to your skin, you apply it to your clothes. Spray down your hiking boots or your gardening gloves, or that one sweatshirt you're going to wear with the hood up. Spray it when it's not on your body, let it sit, it'll dry, and then you'll have that protection for weeks, and then it's not, directly on your body.
Should we worry about pets?
We should worry about pets in terms of Dorg heartworm. So mosquitoes transmit Dorg heartworm, so you do want to watch out for that. There's not a whole lot of stuff, for spray on for dogs. Most of that stuff is the chewables or the things. I mean, there's flea collars and stuff like that. They don't usually protect so well against mosquitoes, but there are a lot of things like that you can talk to your vet about.
And one thing, and we got a couple minutes left, but I wanted to touch on this. I know it's not your expertise per se, but I know you're familiar with it. At least ticks I've seen. I saw a report that the tick season is up in sort of around southern New England. I don't know what causes that, why the mosquitoes are low and the ticks are high, but you could sort of address that.
So certainly ticks have no relationship to water. So rain, except for having a nice, warm, moist habitat for ticks, they don't need the water like the mosquitoes do. But the ticks that we're concerned about here in this area would be the black-legged tick, also known as the deer tick. It transmits Lyme disease through its bite. It has a 2-year cycle, so it takes a while for it to become an adult. So if it has if there's a good acorn year, right, so you get a lot of food for all of our small woodland creatures like mice and chipmunks and squirrels that help grow those ticks from the early stages of larval and nymphal to become adults, which we think of on deer, right? That's why they're called deer ticks, but they are carried on all sorts of animals, including those other ones. Those are the reasons why we end up having high tick years. And then when it's just a normal summer, those ticks can go and hang out in your mulch, in your wood piles where they stay warm, they don't dry out, they don't desiccate and die. And then, you get a nice day like today and, they all can come right back out. They're not as, they don't need blood meals like they do for mosquitoes to lay all these eggs. So they only need one blood meal to get to the next life stage, and then they take their next blood meal when she's ready to lay her eggs.
That's amazing, because I think the perception is again, wetness is a factor in that, but really it has, as you said at the start, nothing to do with it.
Right. And we can have a good, as long as it's moist, you need to have those moist areas.
And the drought really doesn't have an impact on it either.
No, because your mice are going to be fine. They're going to be providing that habitat for that. They live on them, so they're going to be providing that habitat for them. So as long as there's some food for our small woodland creatures, then ticks usually do pretty good.
How about, I know that obviously if people have questions or whatever, I know you were always available on website, but just give people some, if they have questions.
Sure. So they can call the Bristol County Mosquito Control Project at 508-823-5253. And we will be stopping spraying for the season as of September 9th. We will have the ability to make more applications if necessary if disease was to come up. But applications have to stop because temperatures in the morning are now getting below, below 55 and 58 degrees, which is the minimum really for mosquito activity, not just for, it's not for the pesticide purposes, it's just for mosquito activity. Our website is at mass.gov, and you can find us by Googling Bristol County Mosquito Control and gather some information there.
And you update that as well as when you from your test results.
Absolutely, and we also have a Twitter at BCMCPMOSQ. You can find information there, just like little tips, like Tip It Tuesdays. And,
no, it's good. Yeah. You check on there as I checked before the show just to get the latest for today. But you do have the updates on the test results. I don't know how often you're testing but they're there.
Sure. Every week we test, and every week the Department of Public Health tests as well. So you can find that information at the Department of Public Health also on their mosquito. And they do a great map to show you risk across, because, we're not just staying in New Bedford, right? We're going all over. We're getting ice cream somewhere else, dinner somewhere else, a wedding, a party. So you want to make sure you get the overall picture.
It's good seeing you again. So that's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. My thanks to Priscilla Matton for coming in to talk about the mosquito controls. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon.